he was still so impressive. And it's that shiftiness that tells me, regardless of who was actually on the court, starters, bench players, people who are going to be selling insurance at the end of the month, it just doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, Rob Dillingham is absolutely the real deal. Live from the Silicon Valley, this is the show that can't wait for Patrick Beverley to be back in the National Basketball Association. Look, I hope that the Brooklyn Nets do the right thing and attempt to team Patrick Beverley up with Ben Simmons. I would absolutely love to see that. All right, on today's NBA Rundown, we are actually going to overreact a little bit to what I actually saw Rob Dillingham do in the desert of California last night, where he scored 21 points against the Los Angeles Lakers. By the way, Bronny scored 2 in that game. Now, Dalton Knecht actually looked extremely good. It looks like he's actually going to be in the Los Angeles Laker rotation this year. He ended up with 16 in the game on Friday night. Now, in terms of Rob Dillingham, like when you think of Rob Dillingham, and he went number 8, and when the San Antonio Spurs actually drafted Rob Dillingham, I was like, this makes so much sense. I cannot wait to watch this Kentucky guard actually play with Wemby. And then a little later in the draft night, he actually got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, from a Timberwolves perspective, they have Mike Conley as their starting guard. And we all know at this point, Mike Conley is basically a coach on the court. That's not to say he isn't a good player still, because he certainly is. But Rob Dillingham will absolutely have his opportunity to make a key contribution to this Minnesota Timberwolves team. Now, what we saw during the Summer League was sort of interesting, but what we actually saw in the preseason was a significant step up from what we actually saw in the Summer League. It was just absolutely awesome to watch. Now, don't just take my word for it. Go back and watch the game. I've been playing some video of the game for you, but actually go back and watch the game. You will see there are a couple players in this particular game that absolutely stand out amongst everybody else. Dillingham being one of them. I talked about Knecht. Two other Minnesota Timberwolves were also there. Josh Minot and the Timberwolves' other rookie player also looked pretty good. Terrence Shannon Jr., I believe is his name, also looked pretty good in that preseason game. Look, as I mentioned, this is maybe a bit of an overreaction. And while I don't think Rob Dillingham's going to get enough playing time to actually be Rookie of the Year this year, but if he was on any other team where he was going to be a starter out of the gate, I think Rob Dillingham could certainly be this year's NBA Rookie of the Year. Now, a lot of you out there are like me, and you saw Reed Sheppard play in Las Vegas, and your initial thoughts are probably like, Reed Sheppard probably should have gone number 1. And while that is true, Reed Sheppard probably should have gone number 1 to the Atlanta Hawks. Instead, he's on a deep roster with the Houston Rockets. It's highly unlikely that Reed Sheppard's actually going to get enough playing time to actually be considered for Rookie of the Year this year. If you look at the other players that were actually drafted, Zachary Richichet looks like he's a year or 2 away. I'm not saying he's not going to be a good player in the association. I just don't think out of the gate he's going to be there. Alex Starr has already been pushed down the bench by Valanciunas, and Alex Starr is certainly not going to win Rookie of the Year this year, is he? So when you actually take a look at the draft, and it's just, as you all know, not a pretty draft. If I had to say out of the gate before the season starts who's going to win Rookie of the Year, and this is just assuming that there are no major injuries along the way, Zach Edey of the Grizzlies looks like the clear player that I would pick to be Rookie of the Year this year. And one of the reasons is he's actually going to start. Now, we know he's not necessarily great against other big players, but that's what they have Jaren Jackson Jr. for. We do know that he likes to eat up point guards when they attempt to come into his house. So he will absolutely make a difference on the defensive side of the fence. In terms of his post plays and post maneuvers and how often will the Memphis Grizzlies actually slow things down enough to actually get Zach Edey the ball? Well, that will happen, a handful of times a game. So I certainly expect him to be able to still score somewhere between 10 and 15 points. But the real strength here is going to come on the defensive side of the ball, as well as his ability to rebound both on offense and defense. Now, I did want to spend a little bit of time back on Rob Dillingham today. I forgot to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and subscribe. And of course, like this video. Look, Rob Dillingham is a perfect fit for just about any team that drafted him. It's really that simple. If you take a look at his skill set and you go back and you watch the tape, specifically this first preseason game, he was in complete control. And I don't care if the Los Angeles Lakers starters were actually in the game, Rob Dillingham could get his shot off at any point last night whenever he actually wanted to. His ability to actually switch directions on a dime is what you should really be looking at when you watch this video. Yes, he did a nice job draining some threes, and yes, he made some nice runners, and yes, he made a couple nice layups. But this true strength of Rob Dillingham is his absolute shiftiness. And it is that shiftiness that I believe a lot of other teams in the National Basketball Association that drafted ahead of the San Antonio Spurs at 8 are ultimately going to regret. Now, I think the Houston Rockets are going to be very happy with Reed Sheppard, but everybody else in this particular draft, I bet at some point is going to regret not taking Rob Dillingham. Now, I personally believe the eye test is really important, and Dalton Knecht absolutely passes the eye test as well. We'll do another video on Dalton Knecht next week, but for Rob Dillingham, just in this particular game, and I know there were a bunch of players playing that aren't going to be starters in the NBA this season, he was still so impressive. And it's that shiftiness that tells me, regardless of who was actually on the court, starters, bench players, people who are going to be selling insurance at the end of the month, it just doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, Rob Dillingham is absolutely the real deal. All right, I want to know what you think, North America. Go ahead and drop your comments in. For the Underrated Pod, I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day. To the cool new music, we go.
This is Phoenix.